The UFC returns to pay-per-view this Saturday night. The first event in New York City. The first event at Madison Square Garden. Of course, we're talking about UFC 205 that takes place this Saturday night, November 12th, 2016. And I just got to say, y'all, a stacked, and I'm not stuttering on purpose, a stacked card that the UFC is bringing to their fight fans. You got 2 UFC Fight Pass prelims, you got 4 FS1 prelims, and you got a 6, it's not a mistake, a 6-fight main card, 3 title fights, stack card. Now, the Rashad Evans-Tim Kennedy fight, that got canceled. Evans had some issues with his medical testing. That fight is going to get pushed back to next month's UFC 206 card in Toronto, which is headlined by Daniel Cormier and Anthony Johnson for the UFC Light Heavyweight Title. That was going to be a good fight. I was looking forward to that fight, but I'm going to have to wait another month to see that fight. Kicking off the UFC Fight Pass prelims is it's a good one. It's Caitlin Coogan versus Liz Carmouche. Carmouche, of course, is a former UFC title contender, ranked number 9 versus 14. That's going to be a good fight. You got Jim Miller, Thiago Alves. You got Vincent Lecout taking on Belly Muhammad. You got Rafael Natal, which is 14th ranked, middleweight, taking on the always hard-hitting Tim Boetsch. Galib Nurmagomedov versus Michael Johnson. That is going to be a sick fight. You got Frankie Edgar and Jeremy Stephens. And then kicking off the main card, former UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion Miesha Tate versus Raquel Pennington. Of course, you got Kelvin Gastelum versus Donald Cerrone. Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero. Joanna Jedrzejczyk taking on a chick that she's wanted to fight for a long time. 2 Poland fighters, Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Then you got Tyron Woodley defending. First time for the UFC Welterweight title against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And then, of course, in the main event, you got Conor McGregor going for that history. He's going to be taking on Eddie Alvarez for the UFC Light Heavyweight Title in the main event. Oh my God, what a stacked fight card. So, I don't know how McGregor is going to do against Alves. I think Alves is a better wrestler. I don't know if he's a better striker. He definitely has knockout power because he knocked out Rafael dos Anjos earlier this year to win the UFC Lightweight title. Conor McGregor was on a winning streak until he ran up against Nate Diaz at UFC 196, in which he got choked out. However, he came back at UFC 202 in August and earned the decision victory. So McGregor he's starting to build up steam again, but there's a very good chance that McGregor will run into a wall against Alves. I don't think Alves can finish McGregor, and I don't think McGregor can finish Alves. I think it's definitely going to go all 5 rounds. Cardio will play into effect. Now McGregor, he doesn't have the best cardio, but he did step up his game against Nate Diaz in their rematch at UFC 202, and that fight did go to the distance. And as the fight wore on, he did get more tired, but he seems like he has his cardio under check. Alvarez, can he just kind of stop the always aggressive McGregor? I think that's going to be the key to the fight. And then in the co-main event, you got Tyron Woodley and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Now, Woodley, no doubt, he has a wrestling background. He's got knockout power. But Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is just a freak athlete. He doesn't show his ground game too much, but his striking is excellent. It's elite. I think the striking is going to play out in this fight. I think this goes all 5 rounds. But I got Thompson in that fight. And going back to the main event, I do have Alvarez winning that fight. I think it's going to be a split decision. I think that leads to a rematch. And then that'll be very interesting to see what the UFC does with the Featherweight title. Now, before this fight, UFC Prez Dana White came out and stated that if McGregor wins this fight, he's going to have to drop the UFC Featherweight title, which makes sense. Now, would he drop the lightweight title? Would he stay at featherweight? Personally, I think he should stay at featherweight. I think the heavier divisions have showed that he doesn't necessarily have knockout power against guys that are, heavier than a 145er or so. No doubt McGregor can knock out 145ers. You look at Frankie Edgar, you look at Chad Mendez, you look at Jose Aldo. He didn't knock out Nate Diaz, so I think that's going to play in a factor. But I actually do have Alvarez winning that. And then the Joanna Caroline fight, Joanna is just a stud. She's undefeated. She's 12-0. Caroline, she's 10-0. No doubt. But Joanna does have the higher percentage, if you want to look at it, in terms of knockout. She's finished 33% of her fights by KO compared to Caroline, who has finished her fights by 10%. And most of the time, they go to decision, as Joanna has a 58% decision victory, while Karolina has a 70% decision victory in her fights. Joanna does land more shots per minute, though, with 6.36 compared to Caroline, who has a 5.98 landed percentage per minute. Moving down the card, you got Chris Weidman and Yoel Romero. I love Chris Weidman. He's one of my favorite fighters, former UFC middleweight champion. But Yoel Romero, he's coming off the suspension. He hasn't fought in, I believe, over a year now, so I think ring rust will play into effect. No doubt Romero could knock out Weidman. I think that's the only way he could win this fight, but I just don't see that happening. I think ring rust is really going to play in a factor in this fight more than he actually thinks, and I think Weidman picks up the decision victory. Now, in the Kelvin Gastelum Donald Cerrone fight, you got number 5 ranked versus number 6 ranked. Gastelum is one of those guys who does shine, but he doesn't shine all the time, and the only time he does shine is very, very bright, but we haven't really seen that in his last couple fights. Donald Cerrone is just a beast. He goes out there, he knocks folks out, and then he goes and drinks a Budweiser. I like Donald Cerrone in this fight. I think he actually knocks out Kelvin Gastelum in the first round. I just can't go against old Cowboy. And then you got Miesha Tate versus Raquel Pennington. Pennington is one of those fighters that is just kind of a mediocre fighter. I like her personally. I think she's a nice gal, but in terms of fighting, she's 8-6. And she just, I don't know, she's not the elite. And you're going up against former UFC women's bantamweight champion and Tate. That cupcake is coming back. She's coming off of a loss to Amanda Nunes at UFC 200 in July. That was supposed to be her shining moment. Before that fight, she won the title from Holly Holm in a sick rear naked choke at UFC 196. She was on top of the world, and then she got knocked down. Her frosting got knocked off her cupcake with Nunes. I think Miesha Tate comes out here with a vengeance. I think she comes off pissed off, and I think she comes out to finish Pennington in the 3rd round by TKO. UFC 205 is a stacked card that I cannot wait for. I think if you're a fight fan, you're going to want to tune into this fight card. You're going to pay for the pay-per-view. It's just a fight card that everyone wants to see. It's the first one in New York City. You knew the UFC was going to stack it, and they over-delivered. It's going to be a great night of fights. Hope you all check it out. Who do you think is going to win? Let me know in the comments area below. Make sure to hit that like button, and I'll talk to you next time.